So it appears at least that Djokovic has won his right to appeal and is now staying in Australia with its Judge Anthony Kelly has quashed the visa cancellation and ordered the Australian government to pay legal costs and release Djokovic from detention within half an hour. Yeah, I'm not really sure what to make of this. It's initially denied his visa application or entry, sorry. It denied his visa entry because the medical exemption wasn't correct. And now it's been turns out it is correct. Or at least I actually don't know. I honestly do not know. I have no idea what the hell has happened. I've just seen a thing come up on Sky Live that they may, the government may still cancel his visa anyway. Who knows? Who knows? It's just, I like, what the fucking hell is going on? I said in a previous video, I did not think for 1 second that Djokovic deliberately got on a plane and flew to Australia with his team, believing he would be refused entry, or believing that he didn't have the correct paperwork. But I'm not sure where this leaves the Australian Open, where this leaves Australia in the public eye, which, you know, it's who the hell is making these decisions? Either he had the correct paperwork or he didn't. And now it turns out, well, he must have, if the court have overturned it and said, no, he was medically exempt. And this has got to be really frustrating for, let's just be clear, not tennis fans. I mean, tennis fans, if you're a fan of Djokovic, he can do no wrong regardless. That's just how it is. But for the rest of us, people like me who just commentate on events, I've no skin in the game. I think he's a world-class tennis player. He's obviously a great, dedicated sportsman. Nadal has been quite public and spoken out against the fact, just get your vaccine, mate, shut the fuck up. Each to their own. I'm not really interested in should or shouldn't. It's too much of a polarising conversation, and it's more, in my opinion, to do with politics than actually what you should or shouldn't do. But countries have rules for a reason. Every country has border rules. Every country is allowed to enforce those rules. So, how have other players been sent back, but not Djokovic? How did he even get into this mess in the first place, if it turns out his paperwork is in order? Now, I did see a comment which I haven't been able to find an explanation for, which is that his visa did not allow for a medical exemption, which to me appears to be more of a filing error. If that basically means, like, if you want to go into, like, look, I'll take myself an example. I have a visa to go to America. I have a B1, B2 visa, business, it's a 5-year visa. Most normal people just go to America if you live in the UK on self-certified entry upon entry. You just fill in the form. I actually have a proper business and tourist visa, so I can come and go as I please, or could. And there's requirements for that visa, you know. So as opposed to people who just get off the plane and sign the disclaimer and walk in if you hold a UK passport. So I can understand the technicalities of that slightly. Now, actually, if you have a medical exemption, you should have applied for this type of visa. But then, I tell you where this does get me is it really does stink of them and us. If you're a world-class Serbian tennis player, the government is going to get on the Australian government back and say, how dare you treat this guy like this? And I get that. I get that. That is popularity. That's what having a big following is about. You know, if you've made your dent in the universe and you're blowing up and you're massive, which look, Djokovic is arguably one of the biggest tennis stars in the world, and has been for a decade. That comes with some perks. It does. But this is also Melbourne, who had one of the toughest, harshest lockdown restrictions. Australia has been incredibly strict with its lockdowns. Entry into Australia, I was supposed to visit friends in Australia. It just was never going to happen. I know plenty of Australians that have gone back and had to quarantine, just be isolated for 2 weeks, whether you like it or not. And these are Australian citizens returning home. But if you're a tennis star, you've got a shitload of money, lawyers, even if you filled in the forms wrong, you can go to court and we can let you in. And look, it's right. It's the right thing to do. If he hasn't done anything wrong and his paperwork is in order and it is correct, what's the problem? Partly the problem for me is every country has the right to refuse entry to non-citizens for no other reason than maybe we don't like your attitude. Maybe we don't like the look of you. The UK has refused entry to people they consider too radical or too far right wing or left wing. There's people connected, obviously for safety reasons, to terrorist organisations, and they're just refused on that. We don't like you. And look, I get, that's a very different argument that's going on here with Djokovic. But it's almost the audacity that, do you know who I am? You can't refuse me entry. And again, I don't doubt, I honestly, and I said this in a previous video, do not believe that Djokovic got on a plane believing that there would be an issue. This has been brewing for a while in the media, that would he go to the Australian Open or wouldn't he? And yeah, if he was going, it was because he genuinely believed he'd get off that plane, be welcomed, and was allowed in the country. I don't believe for 1 second he or his team were trying to fiddle the system. They obviously believed all of their paperwork was in order, they had the correct visas, blah, blah, blah. So this they weren't expecting. So I even understand why they've fought to stay. But this doesn't end well for anyone. It just doesn't. There are people who have been refused entry to Australia. There are Australians that had to quarantine for 2 weeks. There are people that have been refused medical exemptions. We live in a very polarizing time right now due to this virus. And it's getting harder and harder to just, every time somebody is a VIP, a high profile person, it always feels like they're getting a preferential treatment. They're getting something that you and I do not have access to. And even though I think he has potentially been mistreated, it still pisses me off that he's allowed treatment, specialist treatment, because no one would be getting on their high horse for you and I. No one cares about our rights. And that's not Djokovic's fault. It's not. I wish him well in the tournament. I actually don't think the Australian government can come out of this well now at all. If they choose to cancel his visa, which they're legally entitled to do, everyone's going to just be like, well, that's petty. If they let him stay, it's one rule for them, one rule for us. Or do you lot even know what you're doing? Because you're refusing entry to people, you're doing this, you're doing that. does the Australian border force? I mean, they just look like a sack of shit right now, and that's unfortunate because, like I said, I've been to Australia. I thought they were the best customs I've ever experienced in my life. They were so nice, so friendly, so helpful. You know, yeah, I'd never met a border force like it. I mean, you could tell they had their rules and they were, but the whole demeanours were amazing. I was treated really well. I went to Melbourne. Ironically, I visited friends in Melbourne in 2016, and yeah, it was one of the best border experiences I've ever had, just because of how nice and friendly they were. They actually seemed to like welcoming people to their country. Ironically, the worst experience I've ever had is the American border. Despite the fact I have a complete B1, B2 visa, I got detained for 2 hours. So I feel for those guys, because those guys are just going to get the shit. And again, that's not Djokovic's fault. And I'm going to finish it with, I wish him well. I hope he does well in the tournament. He's always been a great tennis player. And unfortunately, the problem with these polarizing times, it often detracts from what our skill set is and why people know who he is. He's played fantastic tennis. He's an amazing tennis player. And he's caught up in the whole COVID situation. Good luck, fella. And good luck to Australia. And I hope, Melbourne, I hope you have a wonderful Australian Open.